Well, let's go in the talking room.
John, thanks very much for joining me on the talking room. Can you tell me when you first knew that you wanted to make movies? When you first wanted, like, to me, you wrote American Werewolf. You were so young. I can't imagine.
I was 18.
18.
That's not so young.
That's crazy young. That's crazy young for that.
Okay, when I was 8 years old, I saw a movie called The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, a Ray Harryhausen movie, at the Crest Theater on Westwood Boulevard in Los Angeles. And I had complete suspension of disbelief. I loved it. It was fantastic, and I was thrilled and delighted and enchanted. And I went home, and I asked my mom, who does that? Who makes the movie? And she said, the director. And so from the time I was 8 years old, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And that's an obnoxious story, but it's true. And that was my advantage, because most people don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And I just was driven. And when I was able to work on a movie, I did. I left school. I'm a bad example.
So you left high school?
Yeah, I'm a high school dropout.
In LA, you worked on films?
I became a mailboy at 20th Century Fox, and it was very exciting to be on the lot. And I sought out filmmakers. I did everything I could, and eventually I got a job through a man named Andrew Marton, Bundy Marton, wonderful director, who said if I got my way to Yugoslavia, maybe I could work on the second unit of a picture called Kelly's Heroes.
And how old were you?
18.
So this is the late 60s?
1968.
Okay.
And I told my mom I had a job, and she didn't believe me. And I had about $1,200 that I'd made as a mailboy.
That's a reasonable amount.
Well, I was making like $70 a week in the mailroom, you know. and I took it. I remember this very well. At TWA, coach ticket from Los Angeles to London was $800. And I was such a schmuck, I didn't realize that Yugoslavia wasn't like, you know, next door.
You thought London was close.
Well, it was close and closer than LA. So when I showed her the ticket, she believed me because I had a ticket.
Right.
And so I went to London. My friend Chris Hardman, a kid I knew from school, his father was working for Carl Foreman in London writing a movie. And so I stayed with them for a couple of weeks. And then I made my way to Belgrade, which was behind the Iron Curtain, which really meant something in 1969.
How did you get across the border at that point?
Well, I took the ferry to Normandy, and then I hitchhiked. You know, it was 69, and it was very different. You could actually hitchhike. You know,
safely.
Safely. I used to come up to San Francisco in the 60s all the time. Just, you know, I had long hair, which meant something then. And I met a group of Swedish and English hippies, and they taught me how to what's called riding the rails, which I don't think you can do anymore in Europe. But you go, it's going under the carriage of a train. You hook on. It's like what hobos did.
You actually did this?
Yeah, that's how I went. I went through behind the Iron Curtain, riding the rail. No, you take your belt, and in case you fell asleep, because otherwise you could fall and die.
Holy crap!
No, it was fun. You listen, when you're 18, you do that.
Everything's possible.
And that was amazing, going behind the Iron Curtain. It was very different. It was the Soviets, you know, and going when you went there, when you went from Western Europe into Eastern Europe, it was like going from color to black and white. And the Marshall Plan, the United States rebuilt Europe basically after World War II, but not the Soviet stuff. So if you went to Poland or Czechoslovakia or Hungary or Russia, it was like 1946. I mean, everything was bombed out. It was in ruins. They were very poor. And when I was in Belgrade in 1969, it really was a shock because, you know, hammer and sickles and machine guns and cobblestone streets and hobnail boots. It was like, yikes, you know.
Okay, so but actually, just logistically, I'm wondering, how did you hook up with the film crew?
Well, I knew if I got
if
I got not a phone number but an address, Avila Film. I knew if I got to Belgrade, I would hook up, and I got there about 8 weeks before principal photography. Unluckily for MGM, luckily for me, the production was a total screw up, and I ended up on the first unit, and I was there for 9 months, and I had all the pleasure of working on a huge budget movie and none of the responsibility. And I loved it.
Did you work a bunch of different jobs?
Well, I ended up being kind of it's called a gopher.
Okay.
which meant you go for coffee.
Yeah.
You know, now they're called production assistants.
Yes.
But a schlepper, you know, I was a schlepper. And I ended up being pretty much an AD for a lot of it. I did a bit of it. If you ever see Kelly's Heroes, there's a montage where all the principals, Donald Sutherland and Clint Eastwood and Don Rickles and Telly Savalas and everybody, Harry Dean Stanton, they're all on this tank, Sherman tank, going through the French countryside. And there's this sappy pop song playing. And at one point it goes by a convent, and there are 4 nuns. I'm the tallest nun.
I think you sent me a picture of you clicking your heels in the air, wearing the full nun's habit.
They said, because I only could Landis get me, and I could only find 3 women who would do it. So I didn't tell them, and I just put on the habit. It was one of those flying nun habit things, and walked in the shot, and like the shot was finished, Brian Hunt, the director, goes, "Hey, you, the tall nun, turn around." The tall nun's like, "Yes, my son." They all thought it was very funny, but I'm in the movie like that.
Are you watching when you were there at 18? Are you watching the movie thinking about the fact that you're trying to learn stuff about making movies?
Oh, sure. No, I loved it. I mean, I was in everybody's, you know, I loved it. It was, you know, people talk about college or the military as, you know, the best years of their lives and everything. Well, my military experience was Kelly's Heroes. My college experience was Animal House, you know. So. Did
you end up making friends there that you kept throughout the rest of your life?
Oh, sure. I mean, huge connection to that movie because it was essentially it's an American director and a British camera crew, but the DP, the director of photography was the great Mexican cameraman Gabriel Figueroa. Do you know Gabriel Figueroa? He shot all of John Ford and Don Siegel and Henry Hathaway's movies in Mexico. And he was Louis Buñuel's cameraman.
Okay,
and
all right.
He was, what the hell he was doing Kelly's Heroes, we don't know. But so Gabby Figueroa and then Donald Sutherland, which was the only way I got Animal House made later because I knew a movie star.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's why Don's in Animal House. It was a favor, you know, so that I could get a green light. And then from there I went to Spain because there was the spaghetti. This is Adam's staff.
This is my staff. This is my favorite bit. You went from there to Spain to work for Sergio Leone?
Well, I went to Spain to work on movies. There was what was called the spaghetti boom. Franco, like all good fascists, understood the power of film, and he let it be known that he would support filmmaking. So the Americans, the British, the French, the Germans, and especially the Italians were making so many movies. And I was based in Madrid for a while, and then Almeria. And in Almeria, which then was just had a bull ring and a pension and a couple of western towns. It's the middle of the desert. Gosh, I worked on Once Upon a Time in the West. I worked on so many Italian westerns.
So you told me this, but I've never asked in detail about it. You worked as a stuntman on Once Upon a Time?
I did everything. I've done everything you can do on a movie, but hair. That's the only job on a film I haven't done. I did everything, but I did work as a stunt guy and for a long time and a dialogue coach. I got very good at falling off horses.
Did you do that for Once Upon a Time?
Once Upon a Time in the West, I got shot 30 or 40 times, and I loved working on that, and I became good friends. The writers were these 2 young Italian film critics who wrote it, and they were so excited to be there. And you know who they were? Bernardo Bertolucci and Dario Argento.
Oh my God!
Yeah, so.
That is my favorite of the spaghetti western.
It's a wonderful movie.
I love that movie.
And Claudia Cardinelli was even more beautiful in person.
Really?
Yeah, she was like. And Henry Fonda.
Terrifying. He's a terrifying villain.
He did the coolest thing, and he told me he learned it years ago, but before a take, you know, this is in the old days, so we had big arcs. You know, the real arcs are to light it in the desert. And Henry would do this thing where before action, after the slate, he would ask for a moment, and he'd close his eyes, and he'd look right into the arc and open his eyes. Right into the arc. And then close his eyes and say, okay, action. And then he'd do it. And I said, why do you do that? And he said, it makes your eyes wet. But if you look at that movie and those big close-ups and everything, it's true. His eyes are like glistening. You know, and he was very nice. And Ed Leone, who was lovely, big guy, he spoke just like Chico Marx. And, I mean, he had a ridiculous Italian accent. And And Henry Fonda, he called Hank. A lot of people, not me, but a lot of people called him Hank. And he couldn't say it. So he'd go, Anka, Anka, in this scene. And it was a riot. It was like Chico directing a movie.
So you're absorbing all of this in your late teens. And you said you wrote American Werewolf right around then when you were
I wrote it while I was in Yugoslavia 9 months. And I wrote it there. And the movie I made many years later is exactly the script I wrote. The only difference, there's only one difference between the script I wrote in 1969 and the movie I made in 1981. And that's, you know, in the cinema, the Aero Cinema in Piccadilly Circus, there's a porno theater in the movie.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I was in London in 69 on my way to Kelly's Heroes, and then later I was there in 75 on this James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. I'm one of the many writers of that. I used to go to what were called cartoon cinemas. And they're these little movie theaters. There was one in Trafalgar Square, one in Piccadilly Circus, and one at Hyde Park Corner, and one at Marble Arch. And parents would drop their kids off at these theaters while they went shopping on the high street. And these theaters, this is before home video, would show beautiful 35 millimeter prints of like Tex Avery cartoons and Chuck Jones. I mean, really good, you know, old cartoons, which I love that stuff. So I would go see these cartoons. They all thought I was crazy. But so when I wrote the film, he goes inside and they're showing in the script, it was Roadrunner cartoons with all the violence, and they were children in the theater. It was the exact same scenes.
Right.
In 1981, when I finally came back to make the movie, half of those theaters had closed, and the ones that were alive were porno theaters. So that's the only change.
I think of American Werewolf, the idea of the transformation being painful, as so radical at that point.
It was then, not anymore.
Now it's the standard, but that being that radical, and then other things that you did, like bringing Elmer Bernstein in to do the score for Animal House, which no one had done for a comedy before.
Well, it was just a straight score for a. I mean, he treated it dramatically,
right?
Not comedically.
Did you start out with a plan to do things differently than you saw, or did you just start out just writing what you wanted to see and then came up with
no? It was just on whatever I felt was right at that moment, but. No, I had no plan.
No overall plan?
No.
Was there trouble that people had understanding the script for American Werewolf?
American Werewolf, people would read the script and say either this is too funny to be scary or this is too scary to be funny. And I would say, well, it's both.
It is totally both.
And they would say, huh? You know, it was too weird. In fact, Werewolf has a lot to answer for, because after American Werewolf was successful, a lot of horror films then felt it had to make jokes. They felt like they had to make jokes. And the reason Werewolf was funny was my attempt to make it realistic. By that I mean, what I mean is, these are two smart guys.
Right.
It's a ridiculous premise. I mean, it's monsters, vampires, these things, they don't exist. So it's a fantasy premise. It's essentially ridiculous.
Right.
So in order to create suspension of disbelief that you believe this is happening, that was the premise behind Werewolf. How do you take something you know cannot be true and have it...
And treat it in a way that...
No, well, have it be true, because it's the protagonist who's having the problem dealing with it.
Right.
The first big innovation in werewolves was The Wolfman, Kurt Siodmak's screenplay for The Wolfman, which is in the 40s. You know, werewolves are historical. I mean, in France, believe it or not, is the place where they killed the most. They actually executed people for being werewolves.
I
by
didn't
the
know
thousands.
They did that. No way.
Yeah, sure, witches and people that just. It's like the Python Holy Grail.
Right.
You know, she's a witch. That kind of logic. You know. And werewolves, like the big bad wolf, or there's so many werewolves, Romulus and Remus and Pecos Bill, you know, Mowgli, but people who actually turn into beast.
Yeah.
What Kurt Siodmak's innovation, which is really radical, is that he made Larry Talbot not a vicious, mean monster, but a victim
of the
curse. I mean, he took the idea of lycanthropy as one disease, you know, a bite, not a curse, not a magic thing, but a bite. So it's like AIDS.
So that originates with his script.
Well, no, biting is the thing, but the idea of it's a disease that's not your fault. When you get cancer, it's not because
Right.
you're a bad guy.
Right.
It's you get a disease. So what he did is he made Larry Talbot the victim, and separate from the beast. So the wolf man,
right.
You know, Lon Chaney Jr. is always waking up going, what did I do last night?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's not Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde, but Jekyll and Hyde.
Is that how it should be pronounced?
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll.
I had no idea.
Oh, well, because, in Jekyll and Hyde, the thing is that Jekyll and Hyde are essentially the same guy. And it's the other side of, you know, it's about psychopharmacology and schizophrenia and stuff. Even, you know, we were talking about Forbidden Planet earlier.
Yes.
Remember, that was the thing about the Krell. The technology made your subconscious real.
Right.
So my evil self is outside that door, and I am powerless to stop it. You know. So it is him.
That's the sphere, right? It's the same plot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyway, so Siodmak's big innovation was he made the Wolfman a victim. In fact, the Wolfman, up until this terrible remake, the Wolfman was the only monster, the classic monster, only played by one actor. Lon Chaney played him in 5 movies.
And nobody else had done a werewolf.
At all. The Wolfman, Larry Talbot. And in the 5th movie, you know, he's cured.
No.
Yeah, sure. He's cured. Anyway, but so in mine, taking that idea that he's a victim, I wanted to take something ridiculous and try to make it real. So if you take these 2 young men who are smart, fairly sophisticated, educated guys, well, how do you deal with something that's not real? You laugh at it. I mean, that's what most intelligent people do. And the analogy I gave is you're with a friend and you go to see a movie. And you come out after the movie, it's here in the Mission, and you had a good time, and it's crowded on the streets and stuff, and your friend goes, and you turn and there's a guy, and he's wearing a tuxedo, and he has a purple velour cape, and his hair is, you laughed, and his hair is greased back like this, and he's got white pancake makeup on and lipstick. And he comes up to you and your friend, and he says, "Good evening. I want to drink your blood." You're laughing. You would laugh in this guy's face.
Totally.
Or you try not to embarrass him.
Right.
Like this. Okay. He grabs you, has fangs, sinks his teeth in your throat, drags you to the ground, rips your throat out, drinking your blood, you die. So you're in pain, you're frightened, you die. But not once in the last, minute and a half of your life do you think, I'm being attacked by the undead, the supernatural. This is a vampire. You think, this guy's crazy, help me, Well, so I want to take that premise. The guy comes up and he is, in fact, Dracula.
Right.
And it's real. How do you sell that? Well, it's funny. So in the movie, the lead character reacts as I think smart people would react. This is not true.
So the other thing that I find totally unbelievable about Animal House, which is
which is 35 years old.
I know. You just had the 35-year screening here.
Yeah.
Is how much you cast so many people in their first movie roles. So many great actors.
Well, most of the cast were unknowns.
So is there some special sauce between you and Barry Levinson, having cast most of a generation of actors across between Diner and Animal House? To me is like,
well, I cast Kevin first.
You did.
I'm 1 degree from Kevin.
But it's like, how is it feasible that
movies are? It's like making a souffle. I mean, there's so much that can go wrong. Hitchcock called directing a constant compromise because there are all these things. I mean, only David Lean or Kubrick there are very few filmmakers. I mean, now Spielberg or Zemeckis. There are very few filmmakers or Cameron now, who can wait for the right light.
Right.
Or do it again. You have a finite amount of money and money's time. So you're always solving problems. And no matter how well written or how well photographed or how well acted or how good the effects are, whatever it is, it's this collaborative stew that comes out. And when it works, it's great. And Animal House is one of the times it worked.
And when you're doing Animal House, you're bringing in John Landis. Sorry, you're bringing in John Belushi.
Well, the part was written for John Belushi.
And you're bringing him in only for like a couple of days a week because he's still shooting SNL.
Yeah, he was on Saturday Night Live, so he would commute. He had a terrible, for 4 weeks, he would commute. So he would be on Saturday Night Live on Saturday night. Sunday, he would fly from New York to Los Angeles, change planes, fly from Los Angeles to Portland, Oregon, and then drive to Eugene, 3 or 4 hours to Eugene. He'd arrive late Sunday night and go to bed.
Oh my God.
And then we'd always call him Monday around noon. So I had him Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. He flew back to New York. Did it backwards. And he did that for 4 weeks. And but if you look at the movie, it's designed for that, so that John's character is really, he has entrances and exits, you know.
Right. I love the idea of you directing John, specifically the food scene.
Yeah, well, that was just made up.
That's
not
just
in
the
the
two
script.
of you playing.
John was, we had great communication, and I would do a lot of stuff where if you heard dailies, you heard me, but you know, you take it out. But I could
So you're talking during the take.
I could talk to John during the take and tell him what to do, and he would act on it instantly. So in the food line, which was only 1 or 2 takes, I mean, that was just, I think it was 1 take with 2 cameras. But it was like Bluto. So it was just, I could talk and I would go like, what's that? Jello. And John, you know, the eyebrow would go up, but he'd zoom in on the Jello, pick it up, eat it, you know, and just keep going, you know. And it was just like I could talk and he could translate it into action instantaneously. He was wonderful. I really didn't know how I was going to do it, that John saved me. That I thought, how do I do this? Which is when Bluto takes the ladder and looks in on the girls in the sorority. Yeah. It's shameless. It's like there's no way around it. It's tits and ass, and the guy's looking in the window, and how do I take the edge off this and not make it quite so perverted and stuff? And in the script, it actually said that he looks in at the first girls, and then he looks in at Mandy Pepperidge. He goes, Mandy, right? And he goes, look, Mandy Pepperidge. And in the script, she removes her bra, slips her hands into her panties, and begins to masturbate. Uh-oh. So I'm thinking, how do I do it? Well, the first thing I think, I'll make it completely slapstick, impossible. So I had that ladder. He jumps with the ladder, and with huge noise, and I, you know, made it ridiculous. And then while I was actually shooting over John to the actress behind we shot that in a high school gym. We built that little set in Eugene, yeah. I'm thinking, okay, and I realized, John, and I told him what to do, and we did a take. And I told the focus puller so he could rack. And he turns and breaks he breaks fourth wall. He looks right at the audience and he raised that eyebrow. What he did was he made the entire audience co-conspirators.
Complicit. Yeah.
And just completely took the edge off. And then I had a brilliant gag. I ended with a brilliant gag that I learned about 20% of the audience got.
Oh, I got it.
Okay, why does he go? People would say to me, why did he fall like that? Why?
He falls because he gets a boner.
Yeah, he gets an erection and pushes him away. Thank you.
I got that at 12 years old. I don't know why my dad took me to that.
But you're one of the few, because so many people would say to me, why did he fall?
No, if he's extreme in one dimension, he's extreme in every dimension.
Bluto, as written, was a pig.
Yeah.
And he was just a brute. And so my first idea was, okay, John, I told him he's all appetite, right? He's like Bacchus. He's all appetite. So, in fact, Deborah dressed him as Bacchus at the toga party. Right. I said, okay, so...
He's the only one that looked right in his toga.
Well, yeah, he's Albanian. Perfect. We used to say, you know, John, strong like tractor, smart like bull. But anyway, I had this idea that I told him that he completely made work. And it was John's genius that did it. So I came up with Harpo Marx and the Cookie Monster, because what they share, those two characters, Harpo and Cookie, are completely destructive. But they're really sweet.
Right.
And I said, John, that's what you have to do. And he did it brilliantly, because Bluto is sweet.
Totally sweet.
And so, like, for instance, the scene that was just, I made it up for my friend Steve Bishop so he could be in the movie, but when Steve's singing the folk song and Bluto comes down the thing, what makes that work isn't the incredible violence of John taking and smashing that guitar. It's that he says, sorry. You know,
how much of filmmaking is that on-the-fly problem-solving, and how much is you show up fully ready to go?
Well,
Some filmmakers want to show up with everything ready to go.
Well, everyone works differently, and a lot of times when you block it with the actors, and certain things you have very specific, and then you get there and you can't do it because it's raining, or he had a fight with his wife, or whatever it is, or the equipment doesn't work. I mean, there's so many things involved, and very often you just make it up. And then there are things that I remember. There's a thing with flounder in the in the store, in the Food King. Where, as written, Otter goes out of the shot. He picks up a can of, I think, Mazola oil or something, and tosses it at Flounder. It says, "Think fast," is what it says in the script, and he catches it, right? And you cut back to Clark. So what I did, because I knew Stephen First, the actor, who's this very first movie, I knew he could never do it if I asked him to do it. So I got tons of stuff next to camera, and I told Tim Matheson, I said, as soon as you leave, you and I are just gonna throw shit at Steve. And Steve was expecting one bottle of Mazola oil, and what came was this barrage, and I'm screaming at him, catch it, catch it, catch it. And look at it's amazing how many he catches.
It's crazy.
Until he can't do it anymore.
That's the one take?
Sure, because he could never do that on purpose. You know?
Tell me the story about Alfonso Arau.
I'm making a movie called Three Amigos. And we're shooting in Tucson, Arizona, in the Saguaro National Forest, where we built El Guapo's fortress at old Tucson. And the El Guapo, the bad guy, is played by a wonderful Mexican actor named Alfonso Arau, who's also a wonderful director. And he's great. And Alfonso, I adored him. And his wife, he's the one in the Wild Bunch who, when they have wired with dynamite, the Gatling gun, he's the one who smiles and says, "Pretty smart." Hot damn gringos. So Alfonso was married then to his third or fourth wife, a woman named Laura Esquivel. And Laura would come to the set and not say a word. And I knew she spoke English. And one night at dinner, I said, "Laura, how come you don't talk? I know you understand everything. You never say anything." And Lara says, "Well," and launches into this story. And the story, absolutely true. Deborah was there. The story is, when she and Alfonso were married many years before in Mexico City, they went to their astrologer who, did the tea leaf thing and did their chart. And one of the things the astrologer said was, on your 14th or something wedding anniversary, 12th, I forgot the year, wedding anniversary, you, Laura, will sit down and write a book, and it will be the most successful Mexican novel ever. And then you, Alfonso, will make a movie based on this very successful book, and it will be a very successful movie. And I said, "Well, how long have you been married?" She said, 10 years. It was like 2 years away. And I said, "Are you writing?" She says, "No, I'm thinking." So on her anniversary, 2 years later, she says, "Alfonso, what should I write?" He says, "I don't know. You're a good cook. Write a cookbook." So she starts writing recipes. That evolves into the book Like Water for Chocolate.
Oh, my gosh.
And it becomes the most successful Mexican novel at that time, which we were sent in Spanish. And we go, "Oh, Laura sent us her book in galleys." You show it to our housekeeper who read it to us because I'm like, what's it, translating? Anyway, it was a hugely wonderful book. And then Alfonso made the movie, which became a wonderful international success. Isn't that a wild story?
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then he took all the money, divorced her. He's like, Alfonso's probably in his early 80s now, living in Mexico with a 2-year-old son and some 12-year-old wife. He's an outrageous character, Alfonso. I was in London once, and I'm walking down the street, and there's Alfonso. "Alfonso, what are you doing here?" He goes, "I'm hiding." And he was, because someone wanted to kill him because of a money thing. He's outrageous and very gifted.
Now, when I've never gotten this history. When did you meet Rick Baker?
Rick Baker, I'd been in Europe for a couple of years, and I came back because I had an opportunity for a job. It's a long story, but I had to join the DGA, and then I was ineligible to join the DGA.
How come?
Because I didn't have a BA. I had no college degree.
Oh.
And so anyway, I was pissed off. And I went to see on Hollywood Boulevard some triple feature. That's when Hollywood Boulevard was all grindhouse, And I saw a movie called Trog, Joan Crawford's last film. which is hysterically funny if you're in the right mood and really sad if you're not. And it's an 8-man.
Oh, right.
It's ridiculous. But I was so pissed off about not being able to get in the union to get this job in London as an AD that I said, fuck them, I'll make my own movie. And I had saved about $35,000 by that time from working
a couple of years in
Europe. And so schlock costs, and schlock is my reaction to Trog. And it cost about $60,000. And it was shot 35 millimeter and everything. And 30 of it was mine, and the other 30 I raised. And anyway, so schlock is schlock was an 8-man. Schlock is supposed to be the missing link, essentially Bigfoot. So as I wrote it, because it's a low-budget parody of low-budget schlock movie, and I thought, well, I just need a bad gorilla suit, really, you know. So I knew John Chambers, who's now kind of, no, John passed away, but people know him because John Goodman played him in Argo.
In Argo, right.
I was very aware of all that stuff at the time, actually. But anyway, John Chambers was doing Beneath the Planet of the Apes when I was a mail boy. And I used to go hang out because I loved to make up stuff. And he was a very nice guy. And ooh, do you want to hear a cool story?
Please.
So I'm a mail boy, and Johnny Chambers says to me one day, John, I want you to do me a favor. I says, yeah. Take this, and it gives me a mayonnaise jar filled with like foam rubber pieces that are like squiggly foam rubber pieces. Take this too. He gave me the woman's name. She's in the administration building. And I said, what is it? It's none of your business. Just take it to her. And I'm really intrigued. What the hell is this prop from Outer Limits? You know, it's like, what is this? So the woman was a secretary. She's a woman in her 50s. And I give it to her. This is from John. Oh, thank you so much. And she could tell. She goes, you want to know what this is? And I said, oh, no. And she says, I'll show you. Come here. Come with me. Takes me into the ladies' room and goes like this. She says, I had an accident and I was scarred, and takes like a third of her cheek away. It was like this horrible hole in her cheek, like there. And then John cast it and made these foam rubber pieces that fit in it flat, and then she put pancake makeup on and gone. Wow. It was cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was very cool.
What a sweet story.
Yeah, anyway, and John, at that time, was doing work for the CIA that I knew about. He did all kinds of stuff. He would make people disguises and everything. Anyway, so he got an Oscar. It was a big thing because he did these foam rubber prosthetics for the Planet of the Apes movies, which at the time was very revolutionary because he did the first lightweight foam stuff.
Right.
And the idea, anyway. So I went to John years later and I say, hey, John, I'm making this low-budget movie, and how much would it cost to make like a bad kind of like ape suit? $100,000. Like, I think $150,000.
Wow.
Like, whoa, what? You know? And he said, well, John, that would be, you know, okay, next. What? He said, well, try the Bermans. So I go to this place. What were they called? Don Post, not the Bermans. It was Don Post Studios in Burbank. And they're the people who made those over-the-head rubber masks that you bought on Hollywood Boulevard.
I bought tons of them when I was a kid.
Right, you send away for them.
Yeah.
Well, they made those, Don Post. And so I go in there and I say, how much would it cost to make like a gorilla suit, you know? And they say $75,000 or something. And I'm like, oh, shit. So, okay, thank you. And as I'm leaving, Don Post Jr. is sitting at a table painting one of these masks. And he goes, hey, kid. And I go, yes, sir. He says, there was a guy in here yesterday looking for a job who was really talented. And he gives me a card.
No way.
Rick Baker, Monster Maker. Has his mom's phone number and an address in Covina, California.
Wow.
So I grew up in West LA, so Covina was like Kansas City. Like, where the hell is that? So Jim O'Rourke and I drive out to Covina. And you got to remember, I've been working now for 4 or 5 years in like professional movie business in various jobs. So I was very experienced with stuff. And we go to this, you know, blue-collar neighborhood in Covina, and his dad's Ralph Baker and his mom. And we knock on the door. Oh, Rick's in here, and we go inside. And Rick was skinny with bad skin and his long hair. And I looked at his stuff on his shelves, you know, his mask and sculptures and things he'd done. And a lot of photographs and makeups he did on himself. And he's so obviously gifted. I remember I said to Jim O'Rourke, I said, the kid is brilliant. Now, for Rick tells it, I was an alien. He couldn't believe. He was so terrified of me. I was like loud, and I used the F word, and I was from another planet. Anyway, so I said, would you do that? And his budget was $2,000 on schlock. And all the molds, well, two things I remember. One is he took molds of my whole body. It all went.
It's you playing schlock.
I'm schlock.
Okay.
Yeah. And he took these molds of my legs and he put this latex on it. And the schmuck, I'll never forget. He's like, it was so painful. Ripped all my hair out.
I've had that happen.
My skin. It was like, Rick, you bastard. Anyway, all the molds were they could only be a certain size because they all had to fit in his mom's oven.
Oh my God.
And for years she complained that my pies smell like foam rubber. But so that's how I met Rick Baker. And he did, and I gave him the script of American Werewolf in London, 1971, when we made schlock. I said, here, figure this out.
And he did.
He did. He invented these change-o heads and stuff. And then, so that's 1971. So 10 years later, I call him up. And
in the meantime, he's done King Kong.
Well, first of all, he worked with Dick Smith. He was his assistant on The Exorcist.
On The Exorcist, right.
And he did Octoman and It's Alive. And he's working now. And I got him the job on King Kong and, stuff. And he's doing all this stuff. And now he's, And I call him up and I say, hey, Rick, guess what? What? We're making an American Werewolf in London. Oh, shit. I go, why oh, shit? I'm kind of doing a werewolf. What do you mean you're kind of doing it? What are you doing? Well, Joe Dante is doing The Howling, and I'm doing The Howling. You didn't show him the change-o heads. Yeah, I kind of did. Cause you motherfucker. I was like, what? I was so like. Anyway, so Rick left Joe's movie, and Rob Bottin, Rick's assistant, did The Howling.
Rob Bottin, who went on to do everything.
The Thing.
The Thing.
Oh, yeah.
RoboCop.
Rob's brilliant.
Yeah.
And so Rob did The Howling, and Rick came and did Werewolf. Ooh, was I mad.
And you changed something, right? You were going to do the whole transformation in one shot?
Well, my original intention was to... Well, it's written to be in bright light with the Sam Cooke Blue Moon playing, and I didn't want to do cutaways.
Yeah.
I ended up doing one cutaway. I cut to Mickey Mouse because it just amused me.
It's very upsetting, that cut. Well, I was surprised because I watched the film last year for the first time in a few years, how long that scene is. It takes... It's
painful.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
about 2 minutes.
I know, but it feels like
excruciating.
it feels like the right amount of time. It feels like you're there with him, understanding that it's really awful. And that cut to Mickey Mouse is the thing that makes me sad in the thing, because it's like your house is still happening around you while the worst thing that's ever happened to you is going on.
It's funny because I was so enamored of Rick's stuff. I thought it was so brilliant that I think I show it way too much.
Really?
In the movie. Yeah. But he did amazing. He won an Oscar.
Stanley Kubrick liked American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's amazing.
That was
That just showed up on a list, right?
His daughter just published a list of Stanley's favorite movies, and American Werewolf was on there, which is that's how cool is that?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But you just told me that you'd spoken with him on the phone a bunch back at the time you were making that?
I met him. I met him in pre-production on American Werewolf because that was based at Twickenham Film Studios.
Yeah.
The other directors on that lot, tiny little lot, Twickenham's a little suburb of London, and it was John Schlesinger, Richard Attenborough, and Dick Lester all had offices there.
All next...
Yeah, in a row. We were all in a row on the top thing. And Richard Lester knocked on my door and said, do you want to go over to Shepperton? Because Stanley is looking at this new piece of equipment. You want to see it? I said, Stanley Kubrick? He goes, yeah, you want to see it? Yes, please. I'm such a fanboy, like Stanley Kubrick, So.
And what was the last movie he'd made at that point?
What did he make? It was before The Shining. So Clockwork Orange?
Clockwork Orange, right. It was, Dr. Strangelove in Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, it was before The Shining.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he was Dr. Strange. I mean, that guy's made so many great films. So I went with them, and we went to Shepperton, and it was to meet Garrett Brown, who had this new piece of equipment called the Steadicam, which I made a deal to use in American Werewolf.
Where is it in American Werewolf?
I use it twice. In the nightmare sequence, it's the wolf's POV, and then also in the tubes, it's the wolf's POV stalking him. And when we saw dailies, Bob Painter, the DP, turned to me and said, "Well, there's an instant cliche."
But everyone always says that the first movie to use was
Bound for Glory. The shot in Bound for Glory, the Hal Ashby film, is an amazing shot. When I saw that movie, I went, you know, it was one of those things where you go, it's like, how did they do that? Do you remember? It's David Carradine is Woody Guthrie, and a train is coming towards you from the distance, and he's walking to this crowd of men, and he's walking, and the train's getting closer, and he starts to like go faster, and you're just tracking in front of him. And I was thinking, there's no dolly. I mean, there's not a track, because how are they getting this shot? And then the train's coming alongside like this, and he runs, and you speed up with him, and then he jumps on the freight car onto this ladder, and the camera goes like this and climbs up. He climbs up the ladder, and then he sits down on top of the moving train. And I thought, how the fuck did they do that? And what they did was the Steadicam. It was Garrett Brown. He was using the Steadicam in front of him, and then they had a Chapman crane going, and he was there, and just at the moment when Carradine jumped on the train, he stepped on the platform, and then they rose up with him, and he stepped off onto a moving train. I mean, all roped off with the guy. It's an amazing shot. And seamless.
You know, I heard a story that when Garrett made a reel of impossible shots, and he didn't tell anyone how he did it, but that's how he got Kubrick's attention.
I didn't know that.
And so apparently he sent this reel, and it... Like,
well, you know that Jim Cameron's genius idea?
No.
Have you ever seen Aliens?
Of course.
Do you remember those very cool guns?
Oh, yeah.
That's just a Steadicam.
Yeah, for
they
the smart
just put a
gun.
machine gun on a Steadicam.
Well, I had heard that the Steadicam design was based also off of a modified machine gun mount from Vietnam.
I don't know.
But at any rate, apparently he sent this reel of impossible shots to Kubrick, among many other filmmakers. And Kubrick sent back word that he really wanted to see this piece of equipment. And by the way, he should examine frame number XXXX because there's a shadow, and Kubrick was able to see the shape of the device from the shadow. And Garrett Brown removed that from his demo reel so that people couldn't tell what the device was.
Well, the demonstration was very impressive because you went, wow, because I'd never... You know, technology, when tools, they're just tools.
Right.
And it's funny because when you look at the history of film, you can tell when something's new. Like, if you look at movies of the 60s, starting in 1962, there's all these zooms.
Right.
You know, all these zooms. Do you know why? That's when the zoom lens was invented.
I was going to say.
And then some people, like, look at The Wild Bunch. The whole fucking movie's on a zoom. You're always doing this and in and out, and it works great. But the Italians kind of went crazy with it.
Did you learn, when you were, after you met Kubrick, you said you guys talked on the phone a few times.
He would call at odd hours. I can't claim to be his friend.
No,
I mean, but he was a very unusual guy. He was not who you expected.
What would be different?
Well, mostly he wanted to talk about money and how to get money, and how to, by money I mean, like, he was advising me to, like, he would explain how he owned the honey wagons that he would rent to the production, and he would own the dollies that he would rent. It was all like finagling and wheeling and dealing, and it was just so weird. I'm talking to, like, I consider one of the great artists of the cinema, and he wants to talk about money. Plus, he was like a New York guy, so he had this, like, New York thing going, which you're totally like, you thought he should have like an accent or something, but not a Brooklynese accent.
Did you learn anything from him as a filmmaker?
From his movies,
but from those conversations?
No, because I would be like, this is so weird.
You've got to take the call if he calls, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to claim some. Albert Brooks, he used to call Albert Brooks a lot in the middle of the night because he admired a movie that Album made, a wonderful movie, Modern Romance.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. And he admired it, and he called Albert, and they would talk for hours in the middle of the night. It was very much, I made this, again, a stupid movie, Spies Like Us, the silly movie. The movie's finished, right? And I get a call from Mark Canton at Warner Brothers. I had my little building at Universal, but I made this Warner Brothers movie. And we shot the movie in one day in the Palm Desert, California, 2 days in Washington, D.C., and then most of it at Pinewood in London, and then several weeks in Norway for the Russian stuff, and then Morocco in the Sahara for the Pakistan and Afghanistan stuff. So it was a fun movie. It was like it was Bob Hope's last movie,
right?
And it was a fun kind of Hope and Crosby movie. Silly. I'm telling you this for a reason. What was the fucking reason? Because we're talking to Stanley Kubrick. It's the kind of thing where I get this call from Marquette, and he goes, "John, great news. The movie's finished. Mixed, scored, cut, done. Titles, Elmer Bernstein score, done." He says, "Paul McCartney wants to write the title song. He loves the movie." What are you talking about? The movie's finished. Yeah, but Paul McCartney wants to write the title song. And I'm going, but where would the titles, what? And he goes, "John, Paul, will you just talk to him?" And I go, well, I mean, you have to understand. I saw the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl in 1965. So for me, also the Beatles are like Christ. I mean,
totally.
Lennon was right, and it's like, what? I'm thinking, it was so strange. I'm like, what? So anyway, I said, there is no place for a song. Get out of here. Goodbye. So my secretary, why is she knocking on the door? She comes in. Like, what? Paul McCartney's on the phone. So I'm like, Paul McCartney. Like this. Hello? And it's Paul McCartney. I love the picture. I can't wait to do that. And I said, well, gee, Mr. McCartney. I said, there's no place for a song. He goes, no, but I just think it would be great to have a song. It'd be a great song, and you'd love the song. And it's Paul. I just folded. It was like Paul McCartney.
Right.
And so I go, well, but Paul, there's no. He goes, tell you what, I'll record a song, and you tell me if you like it. Well, I don't think. Great. Goodbye. Click. Get a call from Warner Brothers. Wonderful. Paul's excited. I go, what are you talking about? So about a week later, I'm sent the DAT. And I put it on, and it's this song, Spies Like Us.
Yeah.
It's a terrible song. And it's like, dun, 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 dun. Boring and stupid, and I hate this song. Dun, dun. And then it goes into a very rocking chorus.
Yeah.
The chorus is great. But the song is Spies Like Us. Like, really? Like, what is this? So I realized, well, I have no obligation. I'll just tell Paul I wasn't crazy about the song. John, Paul McCartney's on the phone. Ah! And I'm like, ah! Hello? Paul says, well? And I go, well, you know what, Paul? He goes, aren't you excited? I'm excited. It's the best thing I've written since John died. And I'm like, I love this song, Paul. I think this song is wonderful. I just completely folded. I just folded.
Like Chamberlain.
And now I think, what the fuck am I going to do with this song? It gets worse. The story gets worse. I ended up putting it in the end credits, and I started it with the chorus, because the chorus is rocking.
There you go.
So it was fine. And that song was #1 in the UK. But terrible song. But it was Paul McCartney, and it was like,
I don't see how anyone could have done it anywhere different.
But like Stanley Kubrick and Paul McCartney, when they're on the phone, it's like whatever you want,
So I think of you as...
By the way, he's very nice, Paul McCartney.
I think of you as bridging this gap between old studio movies and modern movies, because you started in the late 60s, and not only have you known, but you've put all these great directors that were your heroes in all of your films.
Some of them, yeah.
Well, so many. You have so many cameos of directors and friends going in your films. My question is there a way in which the film business is radically different than it used to be?
Yeah, absolutely. The film business is completely different.
And then is it totally different?
Filmmaking is not different.
Okay.
Filmmaking hasn't changed in 100 years. Different technology,
right?
But the way you tell a story through the juxtaposition of images.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Griffith and Eisenstein. It's pretty much the same.
Right.
And if you look at a production still from 1905 and a production still from 2013, they're identical.
Yeah.
It's a recording device, a motion picture device, on sticks or a crane, and actors in front and a crew behind it. It's piecework, It hasn't changed. The movie business has changed radically for many reasons, economic reasons, And it's a different time, and they're making different kinds of movies. I was very lucky, in retrospect, unaware of it at the time, to become a Hollywood filmmaker in the 70s. Because in 1969, the movie business was dying.
The old studio system.
The studio system, because of television, and basically, and there were factories designed to make movies, these big factories. And what everyone misunderstands is the movie theaters didn't own the theaters. The theaters owned the studios.
Oh, it was that way around.
Lowe's Inc. owned MGM.
Right.
These were factories to stock their shelves. There were like 9 majors. Each one of those companies made like 52 feature films a year for like 35, 40 years. And what's shocking is how good most of them were.
Right.
It's quite something. Well, it all changed, and the business changed and all this stuff, and drive-ins and television, they didn't really know how to deal with it and stuff. And in 1969, Easy Rider came out. And it was this independent movie, and it made $100 million. It was this huge international hit. So for the first time, the executives at the studios went, well, maybe the filmmakers know what they're doing. And you have this golden time in American cinema from the late 60s, goes all the way into the 85, maybe,
right,
where you look at the movies from The Godfather and Network and Midnight Cowboy and Missing and so many extraordinary movies being made because there was a tremendous amount of respect for the director, for the filmmakers.
Right.
And you had Robert Altman making pictures for 20th Century Fox. You know, you had a really interesting time. And I came in that. And so I came at a time when filmmakers were given more freedom. And the economic pressures were a little different. Now it's very different.
They no longer have that kind of freedom?
Well, no, you don't. I mean, some do, but no, you don't. And the interesting thing, they're making less, the big studios, they're making less movies with bigger budgets. And I don't want to say dumbed down, because that's not the issue. The issue is you have an international market, and marketing costs are so huge now. Rule of thumb used to be 2.5 times negative, you're out. Which means Animal House, you make it for $2 million, they spend another $1.5 million to sell it. And then I've made 10 movies, maybe 11 movies, that made more money their second weekend than their first, because movies used to work through word of mouth.
Right. And
you'd see the movie and you'd tell and it would stay for months. The Exorcist, Jaws, these movies would play for, Kentucky Fried played for like 4 months. Animal House played for 6 months.
Yeah.
You'd be in the premier theaters, then you go to the neighborhoods, then you go to the drive-ins, and you could play a movie. Now, it costs a fortune to open a movie. Marketing costs are incredibly expensive, and it's so intense. If you don't open, delivering paid admissions, or what the British call bums on seats, your first 3 days, you're fucked.
Oh no, I'm seeing now. You read Deadline, and if the first Thursday night midnight showing.
Oh, they do these projections.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you don't deliver, you're out, and it's brutal. And it's just the internet. You really look at the way the industry's dealing with the internet. Look what the internet did to the music business. It just killed it. It's like cancer. And you have one of the most interesting things about it is that you have generation now that includes my son and probably you, but where people can download stuff, and if you can download it for free, and you can get it for free, you don't even consider it theft.
Right.
I mean, it's really interesting. It's a whole different mindset, and it's just changing. And it will, by the way, it will figure itself out eventually. But it's ironic because it's easier to make a movie than ever because of technology. You could shoot a movie on your flip camera and cut it on your laptop, and you can make a perfectly serviceable little thing. But try to get it shown. You could show it for free, but try to monetize it. Try to, and it's just very. It's an unsettling time, and there's all these complaints about, they're not making movies for adults. And the adults aren't going.
Right.
I mean, you have to, I really believe Argo was a movie that I thought was really good. Was it genius? No. But everyone saw it and went, hey, this isn't stupid.
Right.
So they were so grateful. But look at the box office of Argo compared to Iron Man 3.
Right.
You know, it's just, you know, it's just a very, and you know, you make a movie now and it has to open in Nairobi, Shanghai, St. Petersburg, Paris, San Francisco, and Guatemala at the same time, you know. And it's just things are changing, and so it's very strange. In many ways, it's a very exciting time.
Do you think we're going to end up back in a more the filmmaker as auteur when people? I mean, I'm seeing all these Kickstarter backlash Kickstarters where people want to make movies with all practical effects again. Like it's like there's an exhaustion of digital effects and there's people doing makeup effects.
I've gotten a lot of stuff where people say, "Don't you hate digital effects?" And the truth is, no, I don't. What I hate is a lot of the movies.
It's terrible stories.
And yeah, it's just also like how many times do we have to see cities destroyed this summer? I mean, it's
apparently at least 10.
At least, but it's not the technology. No. They're just tools. It's the movies. It's the story.
Yeah.
You know, and I love practical effects, but I also think like CG's amazing what you can do. I think it's not always good, but when it's well done and when it's used. I remember seeing Pan's Labyrinth, and there's a moment in Pan's Labyrinth. Now this is a piece of gore, but there was a moment where the black shirt guy, it's one shot and it's kind of a medium master with like 4 or 5 people in it, and they take the prisoner and they put him down on his knees, and the bad guy's holding a bottle of wine and he's talking, and all of a sudden he turns and goes wham in the guy's face, and he hits him like 8 times and just crushes in his face. Yeah. It's incredibly brutal.
It's really upsetting
because it's so matter of fact, and it's a kind of a wide shot and everything.
Yeah.
And I said to Guillermo, how the hell did you do that? It was CG. And nobody knew it was CG.
Right.
I mean, the best effects are invisible effects.
Yeah.
And when CG's used well, and I remember in the Pirates of the Caribbean, I wasn't crazy about those movies, but I thought Davy Jones, I thought he was great.
Magnificent. So
that's all CG.
Your son Max is right as we speak
He's
in the middle.
his first feature.
Directing his first feature. You must be proud as punch about it.
My son Max has been writing movies since he was a little boy, and he's always written interesting stuff, and he has an incredible imagination, and he's certainly schooled in the culture.
Yeah.
And he's a wild man, my son Max, but he's very gifted, and I'm thrilled. Are you kidding? I'm thrilled.
Has he come to you for a specific nugget, or did you send him off with one thing to know? Do you have a piece of filmmaking advice you would dispense?
I did. I was pleased that he took several of my notes.
On the script, or on the...
Well, just on how to practically direct. When I would teach at Sundance, and it was interesting, I would watch I was up there with Frank Oz and Paul Mazursky and David Cronenberg and a bunch of people. Who else was there? Really interesting directors and stuff. And what I saw a lot of people do is they would like work with the young filmmakers, a lot of whom are big directors now, but work with the young filmmakers in a way that I thought was like, no, it's not your movie. Leave the shit in. Like, you know, the young girl or young guy. All I said was, what do you want to see on camera? And I'll give you practical advice on how to realize it. Like if you're already lit, I remember there's this stuff like, we're already lit this way, and you're getting the close-up of the girl answering the door. Why don't you do an over-the-shoulder while we're here? Oh, because you're already lit? It's just an extra shot to have and another performance. Oh, you know, and shoot everything this way before you turn around. You know, just practical stuff. Right. And, you know, I was explaining how to use the frame and stuff. So I was just giving practical advice because I didn't, unless I thought something was like offensive, why? It's theirs. It's not my job. So anyway, with Max, I gave him practical advice, and I was pleased to see he's doing a lot of it. I told him, definitely do a shot list, work everything out in your head, and then throw it away if you want.
Right.
But at least you'll know what you need. And so he's halfway through, and he's doing very well. I'm not involved, you know. I visited once. There are a lot of young filmmakers now, a lot of filmmakers, period, who I think are amazing. And you know what movie I loved There was a movie I saw. I was flying back from Australia, and I said, "What's this? Jack Black, Shirley MacLaine, Matthew McConaughey, Bernie? What is this?" Directed by Richard Linklater. Great.
Really?
Yeah, nobody saw it. No one saw it. It's wonderful. It's really
all right.
Good movie. And, you know, it's just a different time. It's like, it's very hard to get the audience to show up for a certain kind of movie. And it's really, really good. And Jack Black is terrific in it.
Really?
It's a true story about a murder in a Texas town. And a lot of the people in it are the real people from the town. And Shirley MacLaine is great. It's a really interesting movie. And funny and sad and grotesque and down home. So like that movie, Edgar Wright, his new movie's coming out with
World's End.
World's End. I'm very excited to see that.
It's the end of the trilogy.
Well, it's a trilogy unless they make a fourth one.
Right.
But it's Simon Pegg, you know, and Nick Frost, and it's got an amazing cast, actually. A lot of really good actors. I'm very excited to see it. I think Edgar's a wonderful director. And there's just tons of really good directors out there. It's not for lack of talent that we see all. One of the strange things is a lot of the studios don't necessarily want to hire directors with a strong vision because it's corporate. You know, it's
committee.
Movie by committee.
And studios give such great script notes, don't they?
Sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they do. But there's an old Hollywood story. By old, I said this story's from the 30s about a writer, a director, and a producer driving in the Mojave Desert. Do you know this story?
I do. Go ahead. Please don't stop on my account. I love this joke.
But they're driving in the desert, and their car runs out of gas, and they're trapped. And it's 110 degrees. The sun's beating down. They realize no one's going to come. We're going to die out here. So we have to walk. So they start walking, and the sun is beating down on them, and they're just on their last legs. When the writer says, "What's that?" And the director and the producer look, and the director says, "I see it. It's like glinting. There's something behind that rock." The writer says, "Yeah." And the director runs up the hill and reaches down behind this rock. And he brings out, he said, "It's a can of cold and fresh orange juice." And he opens it. He says, "Let's drink it." And the producer says, "Wait, I have to piss in it first."
I think that's as good a place to stop as any. John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, CK Dexter, hey!